she saw something horrifying. She said it was a tall creature, about 7 foot, wearing a black robe. She said she saw it and froze in fear, and it kept looking at her. Like something punched my dresser across the room. My bed started aggressively vibrating. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to episode 68 of your Ghost Stories podcast. What an honour and a privilege it is to have you here with me today, sharing this exact moment in time together on this weird rock flying through space. Unfortunately for you, you've got to put up with just my voice and weird sense of humour today, as the guest I had scheduled in for this week had to postpone. So on today's episode, instead, I'm going to be reading you 3 incredibly creepy true short stories that I came across recently. But before we do that, if you haven't already and are feeling that extra little bit kind today, then please remember to hit follow wherever you listen to this podcast, as it really helps the podcast continue to grow and be heard by more awesome people just like yourself. Or if you're feeling selfish and want to keep this podcast all to yourself, then I guess that's okay too. In other news, I watched the latest Ghostbusters film with my partner Sammy last night. It's one of her favourite franchises, and we've been meaning to watch it since it came out. But normal things like going to the cinema are quite difficult when you have a 1-year-old. So anyway, we managed to get to it last night. We hired it for a £5 on Prime, and I think I fell asleep within about 10-15 minutes of press and play. So you won't be hearing my thoughts or a review on that film. But apparently it was good. More importantly today though, firstly, we're going to journey to the Blue Ridge Mountains, where a family faces unexplainable horrors at their grandmother's house. Then next, we'll uncover the haunting past of the old slaughterhouse. This is a childhood home with a dark history and restless spirits. And then finally, we'll confront the Mimic, a ghostly presence that mimics family members and creates chaos in their family home. I'm going to put a poll up on Spotify, so if you're listening there, which is an impressive 73% of you, then I'd love to know which out of these 3 was your favourite story from this episode.
Your ghost stories. Your ghost stories.
Terror in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We lived in a big house that was located in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We grew up there, and nothing ever happened. But when we went to stay at my grandma's house, that was just down the road, the creepiest things would happen to my sister. She would say at night, after we all fell asleep, she would be woken up by a slap across the stomach. She thought it was me and would come into my room and yell at me. When she came in, I was sound asleep and she freaked me out, so I let her sleep in my room. Another time, we were outside playing and it was just getting dark. I said as we were cleaning up, I had to go inside to the bathroom and I'd be back. She said, okay, but when I got back, she was laying on the ground, screaming and crying. She said she saw me come out of the house and run right at her and then punch her. Then she said I took off around the corner of the house, and when she went after me, she saw something horrifying. She said it was a tall creature, about 7 foot, wearing a black robe. She said she saw it and froze in fear, and it kept looking at her. But all she began to see was its glowing eyes from the darkness. Then she said it let out a horrible scream, and she just blinked, and it was gone. Then she collapsed on the ground where I saw her. She told my grandma, but she acted like my sister was just playing. 2 days later, my grandma came flying up to our house about 10 a.m. She came in screaming. She said she was alone last night in the kitchen making brownies when she heard someone at the front door knocking. She said it was around 8, and so she was a little scared, but she went to see who it was, and there was no one there. She thought it was some little kid from down the road, so she didn't think much of it. But then later in the kitchen, she saw something out the corner of her eye, which looked like a little man walking from the living room up the stairs, and she freaked out. But then she talked herself down, thinking she was just seeing things. She said she didn't go to bed till 3 in the morning, which is really unusual for her. She said it was around 10 in the morning when she felt the blanket being pulled off her. That's when she shot up and saw a little man at the foot of her bed smiling. So she ran out of the house and came straight to us. She has since sold the house. Well, there we have it for story 1. I don't blame Granny for selling the house. A seemingly peaceful family home turned into a site of supernatural terror, with these strange attacks on the sister and unexplainable sightings by the grandmother, which, just came out of the blue. So it's a nope from me. What makes it even worse is when you Google the Blue Ridge Mountains, it says they are a province of the larger Appalachian Highland Range. And if you listened a few episodes back or have heard anything about the Appalachian Mountains, you'll know some funky goings-on happens over there. Up next, we have dun dun dun, the old slaughterhouse. I mean, come on, you gotta give it to that one already. What a name. North Jersey in the mountains. Hold on, why has it always gotta be mountains? Anyway, North Jersey in the mountains. Our family home was part of a mining railroad. The old railroad was in our backwoods. Our home was an old slaughterhouse / livestock farm. Dug up skulls and bones my whole childhood. We actually had the ruins of the old slaughter mill in a field with a blood drainage system to a pit with lots of bones. My entire childhood, stuff would just fly off my shelves on top of the floor, or you'd set an object down on the counter and it would just be gone. I actually witnessed these things. Sometimes I would feel someone sit on my bed too. As a young adult, I constantly burned sage in my room to try and get rid of whatever was stuck in my room. My parents remodeled the house and found a bunch of animal bones buried in the foundation. And by foundation, I mean a pile of dirt with wood set on top of it. Eventually, I felt the scary things leave my room, but there was something else still present. During COVID, I moved back in with my parents, and a few times a week, I would hear their heavy door open and shut. They had a porch and deck with multiple doors, so air pressure literally could not cause a door to slam. I'd hear heavy bootsteps down the stairs and yell, "Hey Dad." No response. Check the parents' window that overlooked the driveway, and of course, no one would be home. My parents are still in that house, and they say that they constantly find the kitchen cabinet doors wide open, or they hear stuff in my old room that sounds like a bookcase falling over. Then they'll rush in and everything would be perfectly fine, or things would go missing and they'll find them in my old room. When they remodeled, where the attic door / staircase was became my mini bedroom. My dad never believed in ghosts, but now that he's retired, he 1000% believes we've got ghosts. He was in the military, so he thinks it's funny and calls the ghost Gladys, but definitely prefers to spend his time outside. My mum does not think it's funny at all, and I'm just glad I live very far away. Even now, I refuse to stay with them. I mean, damn. But what do you expect if you're going to buy a house that's an ex-slaughterhouse? You know, there's going to be a lot of negative or bad energy there, right? I'm sure it's not the ghost of a angry cow either, or angry sheep. It's probably some 7-foot geezer wearing leather apron with a massive butcher's knife. That's what comes to my head. But yeah, I mean, all those bones and the drainage system doesn't sound like the kind of place you want to bring up your kids, does it? I mean, no offense to your parents. I'm sure it's a lovely house. Maybe. But yeah, some people make strange decisions. Next up, we have The Mimic. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you'll know that is something that I've encountered myself, along with many, many other people. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I call it The Mimic. When I was 17, for almost a whole year, almost every time my mum and sister were out of town for the day shopping and I was home alone, I'd hear it. Keys jingling in the front door. The click of the lock. The scrape of the door sliding open and closed as the dogs rushed to the front door, barking to greet whoever just came home. I'd hear my mum or sister tell the dogs to stop and that they live here, and the dogs would stop barking and go about their business. I would get up and go to say hi and help put things away, but nobody would be there. It stopped happening once I started staying in bed and calling my mum to see where they were instead of getting up to greet them. Once after my mum had surgery, she was staying at her parents' place for a few weeks to heal. I brought my dog for a walk, and when I came home, my mum's dog, who was asleep in her room, started barking. I heard my mum tell her, "Shelby, stop barking." And after a few more barks, she listened and stopped. I ran to my mum's room to say hello. I hadn't seen her in a few weeks at that point. I didn't even know she was coming home, but her room was empty. I still don't know what it was or why the dogs listened to the disembodied voice. I don't know why it was stealing my family's voice. A lot of other stuff happened at that apartment, from knocking in the walls to claws scraping down my closet. In the same apartment, My sister had just left to go to her boyfriend's, and my mum was at work. I started feeling sick one day, so I grabbed a banana and went to my room to try and feel better. Almost as soon as I got on the bed, I heard knocking coming from inside the walls. I could replicate it exactly by knocking my knuckle against the wall. I called my sister crying because I didn't know what it was, and she came home. But just before the front door opened, the knocking stopped. She made sure I was alright and left again, and everything was quiet. I stood up to go, threw in my banana peel, and as I was walking past my closet and out of the bedroom, I heard one final knock on the walls. A few months later, I rearranged my bedroom and set up a little reading corner where I was leaning against my closet in a little blanket nest I made on the floor. It only happened when I was leaning against the door for over 20 minutes, but any time I would be reading in my little nest, I would hear and feel the vibrations of the door rumbling against my back. What sounded like claws dragging down the inside of the closet door, trying to get out. It only happened 3 times before I rearranged my room again. This time, I put my bed against the closet door so anything in there couldn't get out. Mind you, my closet was completely full to the top. A kitten couldn't even fit in there. So I don't know where the sound was coming from, but it certainly wasn't the 3 garbage bags pressing against the door. I still heard things coming from the closet after moving my bed against it, but I felt safer knowing it couldn't get out. I still don't know what was in that apartment, but I'm glad it didn't follow me when we left. Something else I just remembered. At that same apartment, I was laying in bed, right at the edge of the bed, with my hand over the edge, when I heard a loud bang. Like something punched my dresser across the room. It made me jump into the middle of the bed, and a few seconds later, my bed started aggressively vibrating on the floor. More recently, my daughter, who's around 18 months, periodically wakes up from her room next to mine and just screams. My sister agrees with me that it's just not like normal screaming, like let me out of this room. She's terrified. One time, I went into her room and she started screaming, and she ran to me and just attached to me so tightly while craning her head towards the window. When she learnt her first word about a month after, it started with her terrifyingly saying, "Go, go." We've just moved 2 weeks ago, but she's been talking to the closet before bed, and sometimes when we're downstairs, she points to the stairs and waves and says, "Upstairs, bye-bye." Nah, kids waving to thin air and being creepy, saying creepy things is just the absolute worst, and not my idea of a good time. If you've got any stories of your kids or nephews, nieces saying creepy things, then I'd love to get you on the show. So please send an email to yourghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com or get in touch through the website yourghoststoriespodcast.com. My sister actually told me something recently. I've asked her to come on the show, so I think she probably will. And my nephew, he said something creepy, like she's actually said before she thought she saw like a guy in her house. And I think my nephew, who is about 6 years old, just confirmed that for her, unfortunately. But yeah, so I think I'll have her on soon to tell you all about that.
Your ghost stories. Your ghost stories.
Hope you've enjoyed this random little episode. Remember to let me know which one was your fave on the Spotify poll. 1, Terror in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Number 2, the old slaughterhouse. Or number 3, the mimic. If you've made it this far, I'm very surprised, but thanks for being a total legend. You deserve a Your Ghost Stories sticker or something. It's very late if you can't tell by my monotone voice, so I'm off to bed, but before I do, here is a parting message for your listening pleasure. I just want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for your incredible support. Your Ghost Stories is just over a year old, and we're currently getting around 10,000 organic listeners per month, which is mind-blowing. As most of you guys will know, Your Ghost Stories is a fully independent podcast, and the running and upkeep of the show are entirely funded by myself. To help me continue bringing you these fascinating weekly interviews and stories, Your Ghost Stories is now accepting donations via PayPal. Each month, 50% of all donations will go to a different and selected charity, chosen by you through a poll on our Instagram page on the 1st of each month. The remaining 50% will be used directly to help keep the podcast up and running and expand our reach through marketing. Your contributions not only help us to grow and continue to thrive, but more importantly, will make a difference in the world. You'll find a link to donate any amount of your choice in the description of this episode or via the website yourghoststoriespodcast.com. If you're not in a position to donate, I totally understand. Times are difficult for a lot of people right now, but if you still want to help support the show for free, you can do this by following the podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen to this podcast, or even better, by leaving us a kind review to help others just like you find the show. Thank you so much for your generosity and support.